Hi, I'm Mariska. My parents kicked me out the day after my father's birthday dinner, said I'd embarrass them if I stayed. They packed my suitcase, left it on the porch, and never looked back. A week later, my sister was praised on live TV for founding a program I built, word for word from my notebook, photo for photo from my past. They erased me like I'd never been there, but someone remembered. Not a sibling, not a parent. The mayor. He whispered 5 words that changed everything. She built this program. And now, I'm asking you, what do you do when your family pretends you don't exist? You can tell a lot about love by where they seat you. I sat nearest the kitchen, where the server came and went like I was part of the help. It was my father's birthday dinner. The long oak table gleamed, the china shimmered, and every person seated around it looked like they belonged in a glossy magazine spread, confident, composed, curated, except me. Kalista was seated to his right, of course. Her laugh carried, delicate but assertive, like she'd spent years training it. On his left sat Trine, our old friend turned PR wizard, who now dressed like a professional news anchor and greeted everyone with a handshake that looked practiced in front of a mirror. They were running the room. I was just present. No one said it, but I felt it. Every time I opened my mouth to contribute, a silence followed. Not hostile, not obvious, just waited, like I'd bumped the table and everyone waited to see if I'd apologize. Do you remember when Kalista organized that gala last spring? Trine beamed, placing her wine glass down delicately. Oh yes, Dad said, smiling. One of the best turnouts we've ever had. She has a way with people. I sipped water. It tasted metallic. Then came dessert. The server placed a petite cheesecake in front of me, and right as I picked up my fork, my father said it. Calm, relaxed, almost absent-minded. Some people, he chuckled, are meant to serve, not lead. A few at the table laughed. One even tapped his glass. No one looked at me. Not one person turned their head. I smiled, tight, strained. The kind of smile you wear to protect your teeth from cracking. That line wasn't just about tonight. That was about my entire life. I excused myself quietly, walking toward the kitchen under the pretense of checking my phone. Celinda followed. She always did when things got too quiet. Don't make this night about you, she whispered, low enough so only I could hear. I stared at her. I wasn't going to say anything. I know, she nodded, reaching for my arm gently. But if you speak, you'll only embarrass us. It's not worth the tension. There it was, polished, passive, poisonous, the voice I'd grown up hearing every time I wanted to be seen. That night, I realized my mother didn't just ignore my pain, she trained me to hide it. I returned to the table. My chair scraped louder than I intended. Kalista was midway through a toast, eloquent as always, praising Dad's unmatched leadership and visionary compassion. Then it was Trine's turn, then the neighbor from across the street. I waited. I had a note in my hand, something I'd written last night, just a few lines, nothing grand, but true. When I stood, all eyes turned briefly. Dad waved a hand. You don't have to speak, honey. Let's keep the mood light. And just like that, the moment vanished. I lowered the note back to my lap. I sat down. I smiled, but something cracked, and I knew I wouldn't forget that sound. After the cake was served, after the stories circled one more round, I stood up, grabbed my coat from the rack near the foyer, and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. Outside, the house glowed golden. Laughter echoed from within, muffled by glass. My reflection in the window looked ghost-like, a faded extra in someone else's celebration. That was the last time I stood in their house as a daughter. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just walked to my car, started the engine, and drove back to the place I was renting 2 miles away. A studio with old pipes, uneven floors, and silence that didn't try to smother me. The next morning, I returned to pick up the notebook I'd left in the study. I didn't expect anyone to be home, but I didn't expect what I saw either. My suitcase, neatly zipped, sat on the porch. A folded note was tucked into the handle. In Celinda's handwriting, "It's better for everyone." Better for who? I didn't knock. I didn't text. I just stood there, staring at the suitcase like it was a marker stone. Something had ended, and it wasn't just my place in the house. Neighbors passed by. One offered a polite nod, then looked away. No one asked if I needed help. Maybe they'd been told their version of the story already. I used to think I left home by choice. That day, I realized I was erased, and yet, what none of them knew was that the program they praised her for, I built it in silence. I didn't sleep much after the suitcase. You'd think being kicked out of your childhood home would at least come with a call, a message, even a passive-aggressive text. But there was nothing, just silence. The kind that sits on your chest and dares you to pretend it doesn't hurt. I was staying in a one-bedroom unit above a dry cleaner, where the pipes rattled at night and the walls smelled faintly of starch and detergent. It was temporary, but I told myself that made it easier. Temporary things can't sting as much, right? My phone buzzed around noon. It was just a news alert, but it led me down the rabbit hole. Kalista had posted a recap of a fundraiser on her socials, Future Care's annual gala. I tapped the video, watching a sea of champagne flutes and flashbulbs fill the screen. There it was, the program I had built from the ground up. The title banner, Celebrating Vision, Celebrating Leadership. Celebrating Kalista. I tapped through the slideshow they'd curated for the event, a montage of outreach days, development meetings, and volunteer drives. My body appeared in several photos. My face, blurred, cropped, or blocked by design elements, like I had never existed. Then the final slide. Thank you, Kalista, for creating a program that changes lives. I set the phone down, breathed through my teeth. I didn't know whether to laugh or throw my phone across the room. The gala was held just 5 blocks from where I now lived, and yet not a single word had been said to me, not even a mention. They took my name, my story, my sweat, and photoshopped it into a narrative that fit Kalista's curated, charitable image. It didn't stop there. That same day, a local community website ran a full feature on her. Columbus's Changemaker, meet the woman behind Future Care. There she was again, glowing in every frame, arms around donors and executives. Her words, though, those weren't hers. I recognized them, almost verbatim from my original mission letter. A letter I had written one night, alone at my kitchen table, 3 years ago. I read it over so many times before submitting it that I could still recite it. And there it was, diluted, rephrased, but mine. The byline? Information provided by family sources. Family sources. That's what they called people who knew the truth and told a prettier version of it. I clicked out of the browser. My laptop screen reflected my face, hollowed by 100 unspoken betrayals. That night, I pulled out an old plastic tub from beneath the twin bed and opened my original notebook, the one with the duct-taped spine and coffee stains on the corners, the one that still smelled faintly of cheap printer ink and desperation. Every page was filled. Schedules, street maps of shelter drop-offs, outreach strategies, names of kids we helped, notes on transportation vouchers. I flipped to the first page. A quote in my handwriting. If no one builds the table, there's no seat to take. No one had thanked me when we first launched. I never asked for it, because it was never about being seen. It was about doing what mattered. But now it was about justice. I tore out one page from the middle, folded it carefully. It was the blueprint of the initial food distribution plan. the same one that had since been turned into a keynote talking point. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt steady. I sat down at my old laptop, the T key slightly sticky, and wrote a short message. Hi, Derwin. I'm not reaching out to stir anything. Just wanted to say thank you for supporting this program when no one else would. I remember. I didn't attach anything. I didn't make demands. I just sent it. He replied within 10 minutes. Still watching. Still remember. Let me know when you're ready. I stared at the screen for a long time. Somehow, that single sentence mattered more than all the articles, all the praise, all the doctored photos, because someone still remembered, someone who mattered. I placed the folded blueprint inside an envelope and wrote my own name on it in bold black ink. It wasn't for mailing. It was a reminder. They may have rewritten my history, but they forgot I kept the originals. A week had passed, but that damn piece of paper was still sitting in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, tucked between receipts and expired coupons like it didn't mean anything. I don't know what made me pull it out that morning. Maybe it was the smell of instant coffee. Maybe it was the cold draft through the window. Or maybe I just got tired of pretending it didn't still matter. The paper was creased in 4 corners, torn along one fold, but the ink had held. Happy birthday, Dad, the first line began. Thank you for everything you've built, for your resilience, for teaching us what vision looks like. I didn't finish reading it out loud. I couldn't, not because it hurt too much, but because I realized, sitting there in my borrowed chair at my borrowed table, that the speech I'd written that night had nothing to do with them. It was a thank you letter to ghosts, an offering to people who never truly saw me. The irony was that it would have made them proud had they let me speak. I folded it again, not neatly this time. The creases had lost their memory, and so had they. Later that day, I made my way to the community center. Not for any particular reason, just muscle memory, maybe. I used to stop by at least once a week before things unraveled. I thought maybe I could blend in, walk the halls like any other past volunteer. That illusion didn't last 5 minutes. Mariska? A voice behind me said. I turned. Triney stood there in heels that screamed brand new and a blazer with a stitched-in press badge. She used to wear sneakers and a ponytail. Now she looked like she was ready for a political debate. I wasn't expecting to see you here, she added, clearly uncomfortable. I smiled. I used to say that same thing to myself every day. We stood awkwardly in the hallway, just outside the event room. Through the glass, I could see Kalista giving a small group of donors a tour, all grace and curated warmth. She's got charm, Trinai said, watching me watch her. You're her PR rep now? I asked. Trinai hesitated. It's not personal, Mariska, it's just PR. She has the look. You had the ideas. There was no malice in her tone, and that made it worse. I nodded slowly. So, I was the scaffolding, and she's the paint. Something like that. I didn't slap her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even blink. But inside, something snapped. I never knew betrayal could wear a blazer and a smile, I said, mostly to myself. She tried to add something, probably a justification, but I walked away before she could offer it. The hallway buzzed with fluorescent lighting. I could hear laughter behind doors that used to open for me. That evening, back home, I got a message from a friend. Thought you'd want to see this. She's quoting you. It was a video link, Kalista's keynote at a charity gala. I hit play. Her hair curled just the way Celinda liked it. Her voice measured, polished. And every single word, mine. I sat frozen as she delivered lines from the original mission letter I wrote 3 years ago. She hadn't even changed the phrasing much. I remembered writing that paragraph at 2 a.m. on my third shift at the shelter while eating cold lentils from a plastic bowl. She was on vacation then, learning how to spell non-profit correctly. Now she was being applauded for it. The applause stung more than the theft. I slammed the laptop shut. The room echoed, then went quiet. The next day, I visited an old counselor from the early days, someone who'd watched me haul boxes and patch together plans before there was even a budget. "It doesn't matter who shouts the words louder," she told me. "What matters is who lived them first." Her voice was soft, unapologetic. Like she'd already seen what the world does to women like me. "Kalista can have the stage," she added. "You built the ground under it." That night, I opened a folder on my computer labeled Evidence. Inside it, I began compiling everything: original documents, time-stamped drafts, early emails. I didn't know what I was building, but I knew I needed a foundation again. "This wasn't about taking back credit," I whispered. "This was about making sure no one like me ever got erased again." I drafted a post, honest, to the point. But I didn't hit publish, not yet. Instead, I opened LinkedIn. I clicked on the About section. My fingers hovered, then typed, "Original Architect, Future Care Initiative." No hashtags, no drama, just truth. Sometimes the smallest keystroke can unbalance an empire. They built a platform with my voice, but I just found the microphone. It was a gray afternoon, the kind that made the wind feel like it had something to say. I stood at the bus stop near Broad and Fifth, hugging my jacket tighter while scrolling through job listings that all seemed to demand either youth or blind optimism, two things I no longer carried. The city moved around me, uncaring. That was fine. I had gotten used to being background noise in places I helped build. "Excuse me," a voice said, soft but certain. I turned. An older black woman with silver-touched braids and clear eyes smiled at me. She didn't look homeless, but she wore time in her posture. "You're the girl from Future Care, aren't you?" I blinked. I used to work with them, yeah." She smiled wider. "No, not just worked. You used to serve meals, Sundays. You brought me peanut butter sandwiches when the shelter ran out of hot meals. I never forget that kind of kindness." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Of all the people in the world to see me now, broken, displaced, discarded, it was someone who remembered me when I felt the most invisible. We sat down on the bench. She introduced herself as Gloria, said she'd been clean for 18 months, working part-time at a diner near Parsons Avenue. Her hands shook a little when she spoke, but her eyes were steady. "I've seen the articles about that Kalista girl. She's got the TV smile, but she was never there on Sundays." She leaned in. "You were." Gloria reached into her tote bag and pulled out a yellowing Polaroid. It was faded, creased, but clear enough to see me, standing behind a folding table with 2 plastic milk crates stacked behind me, ladling soup into styrofoam bowls. My hair was in a bun, my sleeves rolled, a smudge on my cheek. "They don't mention you anymore," Gloria said. "But I remember." My throat caught. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or exhale or scream. That photo? It meant more than any glossy press piece, more than all the fake award plaques hung in Kalista's media room. "I didn't think anyone noticed," I said quietly. She looked at me like I'd missed the whole point. "Baby, we don't forget who shows up when it's raining." After she left to catch her transfer, I held the photo like a secret talisman, something old and real, something no one could retouch or rewrite. I headed toward the community center, not out of impulse, but out of something closer to instinct. I hadn't stepped foot inside since the fundraiser, since my face became someone else's PR tool. The building had changed. The walls, once covered in kid-made art and hand-drawn signs, were now plastered with digital posters, corporate logos, and staged photos. It felt more like a showroom than a shelter. "Hi there," a young woman chirped at the entrance. "You're here for the media tour?" I nodded slowly. "Just observing today." "Great. Thanks for supporting our founder's vision." I smiled tightly. "Of course." I walked through the main hallway, pretending to admire the new flooring, while my feet echoed on it like a stranger. Every table I had once wiped down with bleach wipes now carried an acrylic stand with QR codes. No volunteers laughed or argued about ketchup ratios, no smell of rice or burnt toast in the kitchen. It was sterile, profitable. And then I saw her, Kalista. Her hair was curled in loose waves, her blouse pressed to perfection. She walked like she'd memorized how to own a room. And yet, when our eyes met, something flickered behind hers. I waited until she was alone in her office, then walked in without knocking. She turned, startled. "You can't just—" I placed the photo on her desk, slowly, deliberately. "Next time someone asks who started this," I said evenly, "don't lie." Her fingers tensed on the edge of her desk. Her voice dropped. "What do you want?" I looked around the room. White leather chairs, an untouched laptop, 3 different magazine covers with her face. "Not your spotlight," I said. "Just truth." There was a beat of silence. Then I turned and left, not bothering to close the door behind me. That night, my phone buzzed with a message. Group text, from Dad. "Make sure she's not at the event. We don't need that energy." The air left my lungs. I didn't reply. I didn't even get angry. Not yet. 10 minutes later, a separate message popped up. From Derwin. "You're going. I'll walk you in myself." My hands shook, but not from fear. "Game on," I whispered. They thought I'd walk away quietly, but they forgot I was raised in silence. 3 days after that message from Derwin, I walked into the event venue like I'd been invited. Because technically, now I had been. No one stopped me. No one looked twice. I wore the kind of black dress that didn't scream for attention, but demanded not to be dismissed. Derwin met me near the back, clipboard in hand, earpiece tucked under his collar like always. He nodded once. "Glad you're here." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. We walked the perimeter of the auditorium together, where the press would gather, where Kalista would take the stage, where the foundation would pretend history had always looked this way. I remembered setting chairs here once, 3 years ago, for a meeting that barely filled the first row. I brought my own thermos of coffee and wiped tables myself. Now, everything was sleek, spotless, branded. Funny how much gloss you can apply to someone else's work when you've got a PR budget. Sometimes, the best seat in the house is the one you were never invited to. But today, I wasn't sitting. In my purse, beneath my phone and a tube of lipstick I hadn't used in years, was the signed founding agreement for future care. My signature, Derwin's, a timestamp, a scanned copy for the city archives, another for the press. Before the main program began, I slipped out to the hallway where I met Nora, a reporter I trusted from the local paper. She was already half expecting me. "You sure about this?" she asked, eyes cautious but curious. "This isn't revenge," I said, handing over the document. "It's record correction." She unfolded it carefully. Her breath caught when she saw the signatures. "You kept everything." "They made me learn to." I handed another copy to Derwin's assistant, a sharp woman named Tony. She tucked it into a folder without blinking. "Use it if they try to erase me again," I said quietly. Tony nodded. "They won't." I wasn't sure I believed that. But it felt good to hear. Earlier that morning, before I left the apartment, I had driven across town and left a wooden box on the front steps of my parents' home. No fanfare, no message, just a letter inside, folded between pages of the notebook they never asked to see. I told them everything, not with venom, but with truth. What I built, why I walked, how the silence they raised me to wear eventually turned into armor, not shame. The box had an engraving on the lid, "Family Legacy." "You can't build a legacy on lies," I wrote at the end of the letter. "That box will feel heavier over time." Back at City Hall, I stood near the back curtain and watched Kalista rehearse. Her voice carried through the sound system like a song on loop. Polished. Perfect. The volunteers greeted her warmly, though it was clear most knew the playbook better than she did. I listened as she recycled the lines I once whispered into cold night air, coaching myself through fear and doubt and exhaustion. Jokes I made to lift spirits in crowded kitchens were now being delivered to a room full of donors like punchlines from a sitcom. She rehearses my past like it was hers. I closed my eyes for a moment and focused on my breathing. This wasn't jealousy. This was observation. And it was vital that I knew the difference. That evening, while I sat in my home office with the lights dimmed and the air thick with anticipation, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a video or a message from Derwin. It was an email, forwarded by a friend still working inside Kalista's PR team. Subject: Messaging strategy, Mariska. I clicked it open. She never talks. Just smile and she'll disappear. No greeting, no context, just the strategy laid bare like a dropped knife. I reread it twice. They trained each other to erase me. But I wrote the script. And now I'm taking back the credits. The mic wasn't mine, but the truth was, and this time it would echo. The lights inside City Hall were colder than I remembered. Clinical. Like someone had set the thermostat to match the way the building operated. Efficient, sanitized, unfeeling. I arrived early, walking in as a nobody, just another name not printed on the evening's itinerary. Kalista was scheduled to speak at 7 o'clock sharp. By 6:45, the crowd was already forming. Donors, press, polished city officials. People in suits who shook hands for a living. I slipped into the back, near the emergency exit, coat still on, heart strangely calm. I wasn't here to shout. I was here to let the silence do the work. The MC took the stage, microphone squealing once before stabilizing. He read her bio like it had been written by angels. Visionary, founder, community builder. Every line carved from things I had lived, experiences I had bled for. Lines I had whispered when no one else was listening. Kalista walked on stage with that same practiced poise. Camera-ready smile. Hair pulled back just enough to look effortless. She wore white, like truth belonged to her. And then, the screen behind her flickered. For a moment, I thought it was a glitch. But then the projection sharpened and the opening frame appeared. Me. 3 years younger, worn hoodie, clipboard in hand, kneeling next to a child at the first food drive. The crowd began to murmur. The footage kept rolling, unpolished, honest, real. Volunteers in motion, me guiding a truckload of supplies through a rainy alley, helping a mother fill out her housing application, cleaning the shelter kitchen late into the night. Then, a slide with bold text filled the screen. If you're going to erase someone, don't leave the receipts. Kalista froze. I watched from the shadows, arms crossed, breath steady. I didn't smile. Applause didn't come. Not yet. Just silence. Thick, electric. And then, from the front row, a small figure stood. Nalia. I hadn't seen her in over a year. Last I heard, she'd started high school and was living with her aunt in the North End. She walked slowly to the stage, her pink sneakers loud against the polished floor. In her hand, something small, a worn keychain. Kalista leaned down slightly, unsure of what to do. Nalia held out the keychain, then leaned close to the mic. "This isn't yours," she whispered. The keychain swung slightly as the room exploded in camera flashes. Kalista stood frozen, the object hanging between her and her own lie. From where I stood, I felt a release I hadn't expected, a knot untied in my chest. Some truths speak themselves. Kalista tried to continue. Her voice cracked once, then steadied, but the mask was cracking. Then Derwin stepped forward. He took the stage gently, not grandstanding. He placed a hand on Kalista's shoulder, not to support, but to guide her off to the side. He turned to the crowd and leaned into the microphone. "Perhaps now is the right time to introduce the real architect." Silence again. All eyes turned toward me. I didn't rush. I walked slowly, steadily, like someone who had carried too much for too long and was finally allowed to set it down. I took the mic. I didn't want applause. I wanted impact. But now I want accountability. I looked out at the crowd, half familiar, half strangers, and I saw in their faces what I hadn't seen in years: recognition. Then Derwin stepped beside me. No dramatic pause, no crescendo. He said it plain. "She built this program. Mariska did. Every line, every inch." Gasps rippled, then applause. Not thunderous, not frenzied, but real. I didn't smile. I just nodded once. Acknowledgement isn't a trophy. It's a correction. But just as the crowd started clapping, my phone buzzed, and the real storm began. By the time I got home, the applause had turned into pixels, likes, shares, comments that scrolled faster than I could read. And beneath them all, I could already see it beginning, the twisting, the spinning, the slow churn of the backlash machine. A headline greeted me before I even took my coat off. "Program founder crashes sister's keynote. Family feud boils over." Another followed. "From outreach to outrage, the real story behind Future Care's implosion." I stood there, phone in hand, shoes still on, as my name became a trending topic for all the wrong reasons. "Truth doesn't trend," I muttered. "Drama does." And I had just given them a headline. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Screenshots flooded in, friends tagging me, others asking if I needed help, some sending prayers, a few sending warnings. Then came the email, not from a stranger, but from a lawyer, my father's lawyer. Subject line, "Notice of removal." It was written in that perfectly polite legal tone that somehow bruises worse than a slap. I was officially removed from all foundation records as a founding voice. My name would no longer appear on donor briefs, press kits, or historical pages. I was erased not just from dinner tables, but from documented reality. I sat down at the edge of my bed, the mattress creaking beneath the weight of something far heavier than my body. So this was their answer. If erasure was their move, mine would be remembering loud. I didn't cry. Not then. I just let it sit there in my chest, like a furnace waiting to be fed. That night, the first wave of public opinion rolled in, riding on curated tears. Kalista sat across from a local anchor, all dewy eyes and soft voice. "We've done everything we could to include her," she said, "but sometimes people care more about credit than community." The anchor nodded solemnly, feeding her lines like a patient therapist. I recognized the footage they cut in, childhood photos of Kalista, staged outreach clips from the fundraiser. One showed her handing a bowl of soup to a volunteer pretending to be homeless. She weaponized vulnerability the way I used to wield silence. People ate it up. The next morning, I went to the one place I knew they wouldn't expect me, home. I didn't knock. I let myself in using the spare key they never bothered to change. The house smelled the same. Clean linen and something citrusy that clung to the walls like old perfume. In the hallway, I stopped. The photo that once hung there, me, arms around the first group of kids we served, laughing, real, was gone. In its place, a framed image of Kalista. She stood poised, holding a serving spoon, surrounded by executives and a banner that read, "Serving the Future." My mother emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a cloth napkin. "Oh," she said, her voice casual. "You're here." I nodded toward the photo. "That one looks recent." She didn't flinch. "It looks more presentable?" That was it. I didn't yell. I didn't demand. I just walked out, closing the door gently behind me. Grief has a color, and I had finally gone gray, but I wasn't done. That afternoon, I sat across from a journalist at a quiet coffee shop near campus. She was younger than me, but her eyes were sharp, listening eyes. I handed her a folder. Inside, contracts, original drafts, testimonial letters from people Kalista never met. "I don't want a headline," I said. "I want the record straight, for every woman who got erased by someone prettier." She looked at the papers like they were gold. "No one's ever told this part before," she said. I nodded. They declared war in my name, but I still owned the story. The call came just after I finished rinsing the coffee cup I'd been nursing for hours. It had gone cold twice. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but the voice on the other end? Steady, clear, intentional. "Mariska, this is Beth Rains with WCBN. We've reviewed everything. The documents, the emails, the footage. We want to run the story, but only if you're in it. Face forward." For a second, I hesitated. The part of me raised to keep quiet, to keep peace, almost said no out of habit. But that voice had grown quieter over time, and something newer, sharper, had started taking its place. "If I didn't say it myself," I replied, "they'd keep speaking for me." We scheduled the shoot for the next afternoon. The studio felt smaller than I expected. No flashy lights, no pretense, just Beth, a modest camera crew, and a chair that creaked every time I shifted. I wore a black blazer and no makeup beyond lip balm. I wanted them to see me, not a version of me, not a performance. We started with the basics, how future care began, the days I spent juggling shelter shifts and writing proposals between laundry loads, then the silencing, the edits, the omissions. "I didn't step forward to be seen," I said on camera. "I stepped forward because someone needed to say it plain. The truth doesn't belong to whoever shouts it loudest. It belongs to whoever lived it." Beth nodded once and cued the montage. Clips rolled, footage from those early days, me handing out gloves in a snowstorm, handwritten pages from my journal, voices from people who had volunteered alongside me. No dramatic music, just memory, lined up and spoken plainly. "They had the microphones," I added. "I had the memory." The segment went live that evening. Within 90 minutes, it had been reshared over 5,000 times. The following morning, Mariska appeared on a conservative local show. Gray suit, grim smile. "I just want to clear the air," he began. "There were misunderstandings, miscommunications within the family, but we've always supported both our daughters. No mention of my name, no correction, just the soft cushion of plausible deniability. I watched it from my laptop and laughed, bitter and brief. You don't correct injustice with decorum. You do it with truth, loud truth." By noon, the emails started pouring in. Former volunteers wrote, so did clients, strangers, even teenagers I didn't know existed. One message read, "I remember you. You held my son's hand while he waited for his first dental checkup. He's 12 now. He still talks about the lady with the kind eyes. Another, you came to our church and spoke to our youth group in 2018. My daughter is in college now, studying nonprofit management. Because of you. They began tagging the video with a hashtag I hadn't expected. Hashtag she built it. The phrase spread like a pulse. I didn't repost it. I didn't need to. This time, the wave was moving on its own. By Friday, I heard Kalista's brand had taken its first hit. One of her major sponsorships had quietly withdrawn, citing alignment discrepancies. She was still on the speaking circuit, still polished and press-ready, but the veneer had cracked and people were starting to look behind it. 2 days later, I stood in front of a new Future Care satellite center, surrounded by community leaders, volunteers, and local kids. The air buzzed with something real, not PR, not pressure, just presence. Derwin walked up with a pair of ribbon-cutting scissors and handed them to me. You earned this. I held them for a moment, then turned toward the crowd. Nalia, I said, come here. She blinked, surprised, then walked up in her red sneakers and hoodie 2 sizes too big. I handed her the scissors, stepped back. This is for the people we serve, I said, not those who serve their egos. The applause that followed didn't feel like celebration. It felt like exhale, like a room of people who finally heard something honest. Vindication isn't a spotlight, it's a legacy secured. But right after the ribbon fell, my mother stepped out of the crowd and she was holding my old journal. The applause was still fading when I saw her. Celinda, standing just beyond the edge of the crowd, partially obscured by the shadow of a magnolia tree, as if she was deciding whether she had the right to be there. She wasn't dressed like someone attending a ribbon cutting. No makeup, no pearls, just a pale blue cardigan wrapped tight and something clutched in her hands, wrapped in a scarf I hadn't seen since high school. No one else noticed her, not Derwin, not the volunteers, not even Kalista, who had slipped away like spilled water on polished marble. My legs moved before my judgment caught up. She didn't speak when I reached her. She just held out the bundle, hesitated, and unwrapped it slowly like it was a wound. It was my journal. The old one, duct-taped spine, dog-eared corners, a coffee ring still staining the top right cover. I hadn't seen it in years. I found it last week, she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered. In the attic. It was in the box marked School Notes. I read every page. I had to. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My fingers touched the cover and I felt it. The hours, the heartbreak, the relentless fire I poured into it. There were things in there I didn't understand at first, she continued. But then I got to the drawings, the names, the quotes you'd written to keep yourself going. Her eyes welled up, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't blink them away. I didn't know it was you, all along. I thought... She stopped. I thought Kalista was the face. I didn't realize you were the foundation. I took the journal from her hands slowly, gently, like it might disintegrate if I moved too fast. She looked down. We thought we were protecting her, thought you didn't want the pressure, that maybe you weren't ready. I let out a small breath, sharp and measured. No, I said. You thought my silence was weakness. You used it as a cushion. She blinked, looked at me like a child caught cheating on a test. I didn't need you to fix anything, I added. I needed you to see me. She nodded, but it was more reflex than understanding. We stood like that for a few seconds, 2 women connected by blood and broken expectations, before I stepped back. Then something shifted around us. A few of the original volunteers had noticed. One of them, Tanya, came over, holding a clipboard and a half-empty bottle of water. We saw the broadcast, she said. Didn't need it to know. We recognized your handwriting on the mission board." Another joined her. Isaac, who used to run logistics out of his beat-up van. He handed me a folded flyer. On it was a photo I didn't remember anyone taking, me laughing, elbow deep in boxes of supplies, wearing the hoodie I'd nearly thrown away twice. Captioned underneath, "The Quiet Builder." I felt something loosen in my spine. Something old and tightly wound. "You never needed the spotlight," Tanya said, "but it's about damn time someone turned one on." The moment wasn't loud, but it was full. I hadn't gotten this feeling from applause, or press, or hashtags. It came from people who were there when it was hard, and were still here now. I clutched the journal, heavier than I remembered. It had always felt like a burden before. Now it felt sacred. Not because of what was in it, but because it had survived everything I hadn't. I opened it to the last page and read the final line I wrote, maybe 2 years ago. "If they bury you in silence, bloom anyway." Closure isn't always someone else's line. Sometimes it's yours. I tucked the journal under my arm and turned toward the community space. The crowd was still buzzing, some shaking hands, others wiping away tears. The kind of afterglow that doesn't come from performance, but from truth. As I stepped back into the courtyard, someone asked a question in a voice too low for others to hear, but I heard it, and in the crowd's silence, I heard a question no one asked, and I knew the answer would cost everything. A week after the ribbon cut, I still hadn't fully exhaled. Some part of me was waiting for the floor to give way again. But that morning, when I opened my inbox, something shifted. It wasn't one message, it was hundreds. Subject lines read like confessions. "Thank you for not staying silent. You gave me permission. I erased myself. Today, I asked for credit." One stood out. A woman from Idaho who ran a community food pantry. She wrote, "You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for all of us who never dared." I read them slowly, like prayer beads, each one proof that I hadn't just survived this for my own sake. I didn't burn bridges, I redrew the map. A few days later, I received a private message through my dormant volunteer network account. The username looked familiar. When I opened it, I realized it was from someone who had helped during our very first shelter outreach. "We knew the whole time," she wrote. "We just didn't know how to help. I'm sorry for the silence." Attached was a photo I had never seen. It was me, kneeling to help a little boy tie his shoes. He was maybe 5. I was in my hoodie, hair tied back, no press, no pose. I stared at that photo longer than I wanted to admit. Then I printed it. It now hangs above my desk. There was never just one witness. That same day, a young girl's drawing went viral. A school assignment on women who changed the world. It showed a tall woman with curly hair, a red heart on her chest, and the word justice across her t-shirt. Below it, in careful handwriting, "This is the woman who didn't shout but made things change." The internet took it from there. Activists, community leaders, even a state senator reposted it with the hashtag #TheQuietBuilder. The media finally dropped the word feud. Now they called it a movement. By Thursday, I found myself standing once again at the doors of the Mariska Foundation building. Not because I wanted to go back, because I wanted to walk out on my own terms. Tony, Derwin's assistant, met me at the front. She didn't ask questions, just walked me to a small side office where I signed a document withdrawing all moral and creative claim from the foundation. I handed her a sticky note before I left. "You can keep the plaque," it read. I kept the purpose. Outside, I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just breathed, fully. Finally. 2 days passed. Saturday morning came with fog and a soft knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. On the porch sat a square package, no return address, no label, just my name, handwritten in ink I recognized. Inside was a leather-bound copy of the original Future Care proposal, formatted, printed, bound like a book. On top of it, a note. "This was always yours. We just held it too long. D." I didn't need to guess. Derwin had his fingerprints all over this gesture. I held the book for a moment, ran my hand across the spine. It felt like holding an apology that didn't need to be spoken. Some debts don't require repayment, just correction. I walked over to my bookshelf, slid it between volumes on equity and education, and watched it settle into place. But just as I filed it on my shelf, a knock came at the door, and this time it wasn't from my past. The knock came just after 9. Not the kind of knock that came from a courier or neighbor. This one was familiar, tentative, but not weak. I opened the door slowly, expecting maybe a volunteer or a reporter trying to squeeze one more quote from me. It was Kalista. No camera, no statement, no entourage, just her, standing there with wind-tousled hair and a brown envelope gripped like it might disappear if she loosened her fingers. She didn't ask to come in, didn't even step over the threshold. "This wasn't supposed to happen this way," she said. I didn't respond. I waited. She handed me the envelope, turned, and walked away. I closed the door, not with a slam, just a firm click that said I was still in control of my space. Inside the envelope was a photo, old, bent at the corners. The two of us sitting on the edge of a sandbox, both in oversized sweatshirts, our knees covered in dirt, our faces shining with childhood pride over some lopsided sandcastle. Written in the corner, in her handwriting, "Before it all broke." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stared at it long enough for the silence around me to shift. Later that week, I took a walk, not for errands or appearances, just to breathe somewhere that wasn't polished or artificial. I ended up near the first shelter where I ever volunteered. The paint had faded and the welcome mat had curled at the edges, but it still smelled the same, like determination and day-old coffee. A young woman I didn't recognize opened the door. "Hi, I'm Claire," she said. "You looking for someone?" "I used to help here," I replied. She tilted her head, then smiled. "Oh, you're her. Want to see what you planted?" I followed her through the hallway. On the back wall of the common room, painted in clean letters beneath a soft spotlight, was my name. No title, no portrait, just 4 words. In honor of Mariska Hill. Legacy doesn't live in marble, it lives in memory. Later that day, I stopped by the community bulletin board outside the downtown cafe. Amid the job flyers and missing pet notices was a single sheet of paper pinned low, where kids might see it. It was a typed note of gratitude, anonymous, but the phrasing echoed the note I had received weeks ago with the original proposal reprint. Derwin. He never once asked for thanks, never once took the mic. He didn't need applause. He just made space for others to be seen. That night, I met Celinda at the park. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't accidental either. She had texted asking if I still walked the same route. I did. We sat on a bench near the playground, the same bench where I once waited alone while she was late to pick me up. This time, she was early. "I didn't know how to be a mother to someone stronger than me," she said. I let that sit between us. "You don't need to be anything," I replied. "I already became everything I needed." She looked down at her hands, said nothing else, and for once, that silence felt like peace, not avoidance. Back at my apartment, I gathered a few things: the photo from Kalista, the flyer from Derwin, the drawing from the schoolgirl with justice on the shirt. I tucked them into my journal, closed the cover, wrapped it in cloth, placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I no longer needed it to remind me, because I stopped forgetting myself. I lit a candle, not for mourning, for peace. But before I could blow it out, someone knocked again, and this time it wasn't from my past. It came in a cream-colored envelope, the kind you usually see at weddings or university convocations. The invitation was simple, no gold foil or embossed print, just black letters asking me to speak at the Midwest Nonprofit Leadership Summit. Headliner, closing keynote. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it on my desk. Not for vanity, for clarity. Because this moment wasn't about being asked, it was about finally saying yes on my own terms. I titled my speech, "The Cost of Being Silent and the Power of Breaking It." 1 month later, I stood behind a podium in a university lecture hall so full that extra chairs lined the back wall. No flashbulbs, no press kits, just people with notepads, tired eyes, and real questions. I didn't come here to defend what I did, I began. I came to explain why I stayed quiet, and why I never will again. The room fell into a hush. I didn't rehearse my tone. I didn't memorize inflection. I just told the truth. Halfway through, I pulled up a slide of the original Future Care proposal, my proposal. Then another slide, Kalista's version, edited, whitewashed, her annotations in bright red. "Legacy without integrity," I said, "is just branding." The room didn't gasp. They didn't need to. They nodded. After the speech, I shook hands with students, faculty, and nonprofit directors who had flown in from 3 states. No cameras, just warmth, gratitude. The next day, my video went viral again. This time, it wasn't edited or spun. Then the call came from a federal oversight committee. Apparently, Lamaris had used altered grant paperwork to redirect funding under Kalista's name. An audit followed, and then an investigation. He issued a statement through a spokesperson. I did what I thought was necessary to protect the family's image. I posted a response. That's always the excuse of those who've never done what was right. Meanwhile, something else began spreading, something truer than headlines. A t-shirt, white cotton. On it, a child's drawing from a school project, a woman standing with a heart on her chest and the word justice stitched across it. 3 states' worth of volunteers started wearing them, at fundraisers, at schools, at community cookouts. A new scholarship was founded, the Quiet Builder Fund. They asked if they could name it after me. I said no. Name it after every woman who was told to wait her turn. Weeks later, I sat across from an editor at a small publishing house. I didn't want a memoir. I wanted a workbook for young women navigating boardrooms, nonprofits, school leadership roles. A map for voices often conditioned to stay quiet until invited. We called it Unerased. In the final scene, I stood in front of a class of high school girls, 30 of them, all in mismatched hoodies and braids and notebooks filled with ideas bigger than the classroom. I handed each a copy of Unerased. "This isn't about me," I told them. "Not really. It's about the day you realize you don't need someone to hand you a microphone. You just need to stop whispering." One girl raised her hand near the end. "Miss Mariska, what did you do when they erased you the first time?" I smiled. Real. Full. I rebuilt myself in the silence, and then I made sure the next girl wouldn't have to. They kicked me out, said I'd embarrass them. Now they quote me,